Hello all. Thank you for coming to my talk. I'll be discussing today a simple algorithm to extract meaningful segments from videos featuring dairy cows. This work was done in collaboration with Marjorie Sellier and professors Elsa Vasseur and Abdoulaye Banire Diallo. Perfect. So this is the presentation of my talk. So I'll first situate the problem, then I'll describe the solution we propose. Then I'll present a small study that we did to test that solution, and then I'll present some results and some conclusions. So the work I'm presenting here is part of precision dairy farming, which, as you know, aims at maximizing milk production while minimizing the impact on the environment and maximizing cow welfare. And for this, we use many types of sensors. We use big data and also machine learning. The work I'll be presenting contributes to two components of precision dairy farming. The first is the development of tools to monitor cow welfare, and also tools to help farmers in their decision-making process, such as Vahid presented before. The other component I'll be trying to contribute to is the acquisition of knowledge on dairy cows, and especially knowledge on their cognitive, emotional, and social abilities. The data I'm going to be focusing on in this talk is mainly visual data. So it comes typically, in our case, in HD format and with frame rates of about 30 to 60 FPS. And it's being used, as you can see, either to monitor cows when they are in the barn or when they are involved in behavioral experiments. So in this case, you have the case of a cow that's confronted with a novel object. The problem with with high-resolution visual data is twofold. The first is the files are big. And that's a big problem for storage. That's a big problem to move files around and access them. The second problem is very different. It's very hard to do statistical analysis on videos, right? You have first to extract the content, for instance, in terms of health markers or behaviors. And this is usually done, so far as I know, mostly by a person sitting in front of a computer. So if I'm taking the case of a behavioral experiment, which has been conducted, produced videos, then afterwards there is the task called the annotation process, to which a trained human is going to watch the video, identify carefully the behaviors that take place, and then make notes of those and their timings on the spreadsheet. And then afterwards, the statistics can come in and we can start doing analysis. The end result of this is, as I showed, like a mosaic of behavior that's going to cover the video. And the annotation process typically takes several minutes for each minute of video. And that's a big problem because ambitious and complex behavioral experiments can generate in excess of hundreds of hours of video. So anything we can do to speed up this process would be greatly appreciated. So here I'm going to present a work that's going to try to help solve those two problems. And the solution we propose actually takes advantage of typical dairy cow behavior. Under normal circumstances, those animals are tranquil, and their behavior is essentially an alternance of low energy episodes, I would call them. Maybe it's stillness, maybe it's rumination, and short bursts of high energy behaviors, such as, for instance, standing up or lying down or engaging in social interactions with their neighbors. And so if we could actually decompose videos into the mosaic like I'm showing here, then we could, for instance, remove from the videos all the episodes where nothing is happening or where the cow is just engaging in a repetitive behavior. And then we could save space, of course, disk space. Likewise, if we could we could actually also speed up the annotation process, because the person, instead of watching a stillness episode that lasts 5 minutes, could just scroll through it and instead of watching it at normal speed. So The solution we propose, this problem actually looks very similar to the algorithm we find online that are able to extract automatically chapters from videos like we have on YouTube, for instance. Here we propose something that is simpler, and instead we want to focus on using the amount of movement that takes place on videos as a helper to try to decipher what's going on. So for instance, if you look at the red curve underneath the video, you see that it changes. And just by looking at it, you can actually guess a lot about what's going on as far as the cow is concerned. So evaluating movement on videos seems like an interesting prospect. So how would we do this? Actually, it's quite simple. If we just take, for instance, let's take, for instance, the difference between consecutive frames in a video. In this case, I'm showing you 2 frames that were chosen because they were happening at the moment, captured at the moment where the cow was moving its head to the right. And even though those 2 frames look very similar, if you take the difference, you see that the background is mostly going to be 0 values, but the pixels around the head of the animal have much larger values. So by then taking the average of this image over the color components and over the pixels of the image, you get a number. You can repeat this for every frame. So this is the definition I'm putting below. So we call this I of f, and I'm going to call this quantity movement index. I haven't been able to find any reference on that quantity when applied to video treatment or processing, but it's used routinely when analyzing fMRI data where movement is a problem and we want to remove scans where too much movement is present. So, of course, when we compute movement, we like to focus on the movement of the cow on the observation, not its neighbors or not the farm personnel that's walking back and forth in the background. So when computing those movement indices, we would select a part of the image and just compute the average over that part. In this case, I decided to divide it's called the star, that's the box where the cow lives. I divided it in 3 regions: the top, so-called in blue, the middle in red, and the green, the floor, so-called in green. And onto the right, you have the curves representing the quantity, the amount of movement that the cow has been involved in during the video. The time runs along the x-axis. It's labeled in frames, and the movement indices are labeled on the y-axis. So looking at these curves, you can actually see, we recognize what I was saying before. You see, we obviously see episodes of little movement where the movement indices are very small, and then bursts of movements. Here I'm giving you a side-by-side for the same cow, examples of 2 of those behaviors. On the left, low energy behavior, like rumination, which can go on for 5-10 minutes. And on the right, you have foraging movement, where the cow is just looking for the best pieces of forage to eat. So those 2 sequences were selected using the movement indices, and so it illustrates the sensitivity of the approach. So to test whether this is actually useful or not, we conducted a small study, and we focused on the annotation process. The idea is we're going to have a person annotate videos with and without access to those movement indices, and to see if there is actually a difference. Well, we want actually to answer 2 questions. The first being, does having access to those movement indices affect the annotation time? Does it make it quicker, slower, or is it the same? And also the second question is, does it affect the precision? Because even if we go twice as fast, if we have twice as many errors, then that's not what we want, right? So before conducting the experiment, we had to decide how we would give those movement indices, how the person doing the annotation would access them, and we just decided to talk to them at the bottom of the screen. So as you can tell, the curves are slowly moving to the left as the video plays, giving access to the person who's doing the annotation to about 50 seconds of movement indices in the future. So they can actually see what's going on after what they are actually seeing as far as the cow is concerned. Also in this study, we focused mainly on behaviors which involve large movements, since those are the ones that we actually see the most easily using those curves. So so this is the data set, so it's quite small. So we have 14 videos divided between the original version and their augmented version, which means that they are the videos which have the movement indices printed at the bottom. And the study went along as follows. And first, we started with the original videos. So the person who was a student was trained to annotate behaviors in the training video and then was tested repeatedly on the gold standard. Once she got a passing grade, then she could move on to videos 1 to 5, which are longer and are the real focus of the study. And then at the end, she was tested again on the gold standard to see to what extent she had drifted away from baseline performance. Then she had, I think, a few weeks of washout period where she did something else, so as to forget about what she had seen, right? And then she went through the exact same process, but this time for the annotated videos. The output of all this is first annotation times for each of those videos, which were carefully timed, and also, of course, the usual output, which means this behavior took place at this time, this time, this time, and so on for all the others. So now I move on to the 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I move on to the results. So I'm going to be very quick. I'm just going to talk about time differences between the two conditions and also precision. So the plot on the right shows the annotation time. The videos are labeled along the x-axis. So you have the training, the gold standard, videos 1 to 5, and then the gold standard again. And the y-axis is the time of annotation in seconds. In red, you have for the original videos, and in green for the augmented videos. And you can clearly see that there is a difference. There is a marked decrease in annotation time in the case for the augmented videos after the first the training. Actually, I mean, yes. So computing those, I forgot to mention, since the study was very small, I'm going to focus mainly on descriptive statistics instead of doing more involved stuff. So we find here a decrease in annotation time of between 18% to 47%. If you do a t-test, it puts at 0.0057 the probability that the mean of the difference between the two conditions, the time between the two conditions, has a mean of 0, which is very small. And this was confirmed by the tester, who said, the augmented videos, I usually just score them at twice the speed, and I would just slow down when a peak was coming in. Then I would just go back to ×1. I would press the button to enter the behavior, and then I would speed up again. So actually, all this makes sense, and it's actually quite encouraging, especially for such a small study. As far as the precision is concerned, this is a bit more complex. So each of those behavior can be represented by a time series. So for instance, the curve on the top curve represents the exploratory behavior as it happened. And we can see that on the original video, the tester, found 4 different events. If you look at the second curve, this is the same observation, the same video, same observations, but for the augmented videos, and we have 7 events. So the problem of precision here is going to be to compare binary time series together, which is going to be complex because you have many different scenarios. So instead, I'll be concentrating here on 2 things. First is the matched events. How many of the original events that were observed in the original videos were actually matched by events in the augmented videos? And we find that it's about 88%, which is actually quite reassuring, I think. Then looking into the duration of each of those events, as I'm showing on the plot, for instance, the 22 seconds for the original video versus 17 for the augmented. Putting over all videos and all behaviors, we find a distribution with a mean of 0.41 seconds, standard deviation of about 4 seconds, which is quite small comparing to the typical length of those behaviors. And when you do into percentage, it also amounts to very small differences. So this is actually encouraging, but still susceptible to, it's still a work in progress, actually. So conclusions. So this very small study suggests that having access to movement indices can actually speed up the annotation times of videos. It also shows that those having access to this information has a complex interaction with what the person is actually coding. We don't know yet if the precision is better or worse when you have those curves. It's actually something that needs to be looked into. One caveat is that this method, as it is only works when you have static cameras and a cow that's actually always in the same place. Not, for instance, if you had a cow who was foraging in the field, for instance. But this is a constraint on which we are actually working on. Future development are going to also evaluate to what extent we can diminish the size of the videos. And the last thing we are working on also is how we could actually change the definition of the movement indices so we can actually deduce from them already, without having to look at the videos, what behavior are taking place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for that very interesting presentation. Any questions for Thomas? Yes, please come on up.
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. So I have a question about, do you worry at all by isolating movement to just the cow and not its environment that you're also potentially missing out on contextual information? So in those instances where stillness, animal behavior in general, right? Stillness or a lack of response to movement in an environment is also a big deal. Do you worry about people just scrubbing through because they see, oh, nothing is happening here, when especially when you're talking about lethargy or illness or injury that prevents movement being a very real concern? Do you worry about missing that?
This information, which is extremely important, is part of the design of the experiment. And for instance, what I'm presenting here is more like a method to extract the information. But it could be widened to take into account, for instance, neighbors or physiological conditions and so on, for sure, yes.
Thank you.